Hello, ladies and gentlemen. All of my 10 user base, you're not users, you're listeners, you're watchers, whatever you are. Welcome today, Paul Carr. Oh, sorry, I forgot to
Thank
do the
you.
drum roll. Do that first.
Oh, sick. I've never had one of those in my life.
There you go, Mr. Paul Carr. There we go.
Am I on an
So,
AM radio show?
you are welcome. Well, would you prefer to be called Paul Carr Jr. or Ruska? What's your preferred name here?
Just Paul is fine, yeah.
Just Paul. You don't like the
Yeah.
junior part? Okay.
Doesn't that only, yeah. I feel like that only applies in legal situations or something. I don't know. Don't you have to have that like legally appended to your name or something?
I don't know,
I don't
but
know.
this is on video and it probably could be submitted to a court of law as evidence if necessary. So don't admit to anything that you've done in the past.
Well, my birth certificate says Paul Carr, so I'm gonna go with that.
Okay, cool. So, Mr. Paul Carr, tell me a little bit about yourself, even though I know everything about you. Well, not everything. I know more than most people would want to know about you. But tell the audience a little bit about yourself and who you are, where you live, what do you like to do, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a former Californian, now in Idaho, one of the many refugees, and I like world building. That's kind of my whole foray into fiction and writing, and just kind of the creative arts was starting with a base of world building. So for me, I've been kind of on a journey to work towards that, understand what that means, and try to really just, it's such a broad topic, you know. It's like once you tell people you world build and they're like, well, what's that? You know, it's like people want to hear something specific and actionable, like, oh, you write books, okay, you know, put you into some sort of category or something. So for me, it's kind of been, it started with probably that tabletop game that I made a while back. And that was kind of one of my biggest projects up to that time, was creating a whole little world in a tabletop game after playing some D&D and not finding too much fun in it. I don't know. I was like,
You
I
know
could
what's
probably
funny
do
you
that
bring that
better.
up because I was moving some stuff from one of my old hard drives recently and I found like
Oh,
all
geez.
those files and like my character sheets and all that stuff and I was like, oh man, this is cool. I wonder if we're ever gonna play that again. Probably not. The
Yeah.
one thing I will remember from that is we had to like roll a negative personality trait, and one of my guys had a lisp, and I like talked in a lisp for like every Wednesday for like 3 months or something like that. It was good.
Got pretty good at it by the end. Yeah. So,
Um,
so kind of started there, and then from that it was, I had to write a lot of the campaign modules and stuff for that, you know, to kind of give the players a story. And so from there, I'm like, well, maybe I could give this writing thing a crack. So I started working on short stories and stuff, and that's kind of where I'm at currently. And then moving more into art and like 3D modeling, as well as working with like Unreal Engine to try to create some like little maps and stuff, like game maps that are more just for viewing than actually playing, but just
okay,
kind
well
of
that's
creating
cool.
3D maps.
I like that.
Yeah.
So in regards to world building, do you have all these different universes, so to speak, that pop into your mind and you kind of like develop this universe and then you just forsake it and then you move on to the next universe and then forsake it and move on to the next universe? Or have you been just working on like one universe for a really long time now?
I started with like the first story I tried to write was like a science fiction story, and it was kind of like a smaller scale science fiction story, just revolving around one character, and that was kind of the pivotal moment for me, where it was like realizing that this smaller story could just plug into just about anything that I came up with, bigger framework, you know. And so at that point, I kind of rethought my strategy for going about building a world, and I was like, you know what, instead of trying to do this like small story first, let me get the biggest details I can, because I wanted it to be cohesive, and I was probably influenced by Marvel a little bit at the time, where they were just every 6 months or something, they were pumping out something in their
Popping new one
cinematic
out.
universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and it was all like tied in with spoilers and, you know, end credit scenes and stuff. So I might owe a little bit to that, but it just seemed like that was the way the world was going anyway. Now even, what is it? League of Legends has their own cinematic universe with like Arcane and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. But
They're coming out with an MMO in the near future too, I hear.
Yeah, it's like now it's if you have a franchise or an IP, it's like you're like legally obligated to turn it into like a video game, a movie, a book, and some spin-off Happy Meal, It's like, I don't know. So for me, that was like, I started with that first short story, scrapped it, and I was like, you know what, I just want to start top down. And so ever since then, I've actually just gone with one singular world that I'm kind of building out. Because for me, all the ideas, like, or a lot of the, like, I'm starting more with like a theme and moving and trying to just express that theme through different stories. So,
okay. So you mentioned you have a lot of different short stories. Do each of these short stories follow different characters within your world, or lay that out for me a little bit?
Yeah. So they do. They definitely follow different characters, and so I come up with like what I want the big plot to be, and then because basically my world is like an alternate history, semi-alternate history of the actual world, and like prehistory and all that kind of stuff, ancient Egypt type cultures, and so I have like the big plot points, and then I'll take one of those major pivotal moments, and then I'll find a character that kind of interacts with that moment in some unique way, and to like get a different perspective on that moment, or like a more human perspective than just writing some, alternate fanfic history book.
Mm-hmm. So how many years ago in the past does this start to take place, or do you span like a long range of stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, I start from like a more spiritual place and like a more biblical place and Christian place, and probably heavily inspired by Tolkien as well in his creation story. It's just, for me, something about that resonates with me. So I start just at like a creation story of my own, and then move towards basically probably like a biblical cataclysm flood time, and then from there just kind of cut off and then pick back up in the future for like a science fiction portion as well. So like that pre kind of flood area always intrigues me, as even how it lines up with like modern archaeology, well like Graham Hancock's type stuff, where it's like they're looking at ancient civilizations, old Atlantis type stuff, and different like major floods around the world and stuff. So like that whole time of history really intrigues me, and then I combine that kind of with the more fantasy elements of like Tolkien and stuff.
So you started an actual creation story. Do you have your own Valar, so to speak, that are kind of creating everything, and then like a pantheon of gods, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I have like the one central like god figure, but it's much more. I try to keep that shrouded and mysterious, and then I think in the biblical story you have like it's written that God creates the earth and stuff, but I do think that there is like some amount of like spiritual agency or help in that. So for me, like just like Tolkien, I guess I do see I do have like these other powerful beings that kind of govern different aspects of reality and physics and time and all these kinds of things that all weave their own unique attributes into the world. So yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that you go ahead in time though, and you have the more sci-fi aspect. Are these gods still involved with the sci-fi portion of it, or are they kind of maybe dead gods at this point, and they only were involved at the beginning?
Yeah, they do. Nice. I'm excited to talk about this. Yeah, they do come back. Like there is this, like during the flood, cataclysm, whatever you want to call it, there is like a separation of those worlds. But then basically the sci-fi portion revolves around kind of some of the barriers starting to break down between that separation. And so then there is like kind of a mixing at the end, and there's part of that's through like artificial intelligence, and so they start to infiltrate artificial intelligence like networks basically, and then they like kind of almost manifest themselves in the world through artificial intelligence, and so kind of piggyback on that.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a guy on recently, and he was a huge I wouldn't say proponent. What's an opponent? Yes, I know that word. He was a huge opponent of technology, specifically AI, and he was kind of just coming out and say, like, I think AI is like negative for us in our future, and we got to be careful of technology and stuff. So it's interesting how to see how everybody weaves technology into their stories in different ways. And some people, it's a huge point of, it's a theme in their books. They're like, technology is good or bad, and I want to touch on. Some people, it's like it's a means to an end. Like, the technology exists because my characters are using it, and that's kind of it. And so how would you say technology plays a role in your books, especially now that you've mentioned that you have the spiritual side as well to it?
Yeah. I think for me, it's much, because I don't think technology is good or bad. It's just it's almost like a vehicle for increasing power and agency in the world. And so as technology progresses in the story, basically just what people can accomplish, like the same spiritual and inner and moral motivations are still the same, but that just essentially people are able to amplify their power in the world through the technology. So people who are using it for good are able to do way more good, and people who are using it for, evil and control are, able to control people and to exert their will to a much greater extent. And so it's just where you put yourself in that really defines it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of, like you said, amplifies it. A lot of people say, like, if you have a lot of money, it'll amplify the characteristics you already have. So that's why you see people who are really good at investing, for example, amplify their money. And people who are power hungry will try and get more power, and people who are spenders will just spend it all. It's really interesting when you say it like that.
You can even see like a celebrity, it's like when they, come into stardom or, fame or whatever it is. It's like some people go completely off the rails. Some people wear it very gracefully and, are, create great art with it and, use their influence for good. So it's, But yeah.
So speaking about your characters and whether or not they're good characters or bad characters, so to speak, do you have clearly drawn good and evil in your books? Black and white. This is Melkor, and these are the other Valar, or pulling from Tolkien for those of you that don't know that, or is it kind of more ambiguous as to who the good and the bad is?
I think it's more black and white for sure. I do think at the end of the day there is a deeper dichotomy running through the world. It's just that it's hard to recognize most of the time. And so, because it's like when actually you reminded me of of something kind of when you were talking earlier, but because it's like one of those things where it's such a complex topic that both people can kind of be right. So when you hear people say oh, the world's gray and their morality isn't black and white, or you say then there's other people that are just it's just black and white. I think the nuances are so great that it's both people are right. It's just they're right in different contexts or different classifications of what you're trying to actually look at. And so I think there is a black and white current that runs under, but people are so limited in their perception, and it's hard to things are messy and confusing that's where the gray people are right.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's actually something that I consciously try to do in my writing as well. Is I will have a scene that two different characters experience the exact same event through their own perspectives, and they come across or come away with two very different experiences of the same event. And it's true. It's nothing is really black and white. For this person, it was a negative experience, and for this person, it was a positive experience, and they each interacted with it their own ways. But it's up to the reader to decide, perhaps, what's good and what's bad.
Do you think if there was a neutral observer outside of that if there was another agent outside of that, dictating whether that's good or bad, do you think that's possible?
I think it could be possible. I've never done that. Now you're making me all curious. Now I want to try it. I don't know. I feel in order for it to be a truly neutral observer, they might have to be omniscient to understand. Well, I don't know. It's a good question. They could be all-knowing and still take a side, so to speak. because then they know all the ramifications of each of the individual's actions and the reason for each of their actions leading up to that point. So just because they're omniscient doesn't mean that they wouldn't take a side. You're making me think.
Well, and just having you still have to classify things as good or bad, which is like a whole can of worms in and of itself. But I mean, because just an observer, yeah, they wouldn't even necessarily have a bias, but to see the event in a certain light, you would have to have some sort of value system that you classified things under, and so
then it comes to the point: is that omniscient third-party observer the creator of the value system, as someone might say a god is?
I would argue, yeah, and has less to do with creating the value system and more just values that align with the nature that you're in, or the created nature you're in.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they're being imposed with you, but you're just, if you want to go against the flow, that's fine. That's just a different side of the value structure, essentially.
So going back to your pantheon of gods, do you have are these gods truly in conflict with each other, or are they in conflict with the quote unquote physical realm, or how does that work in your story?
Yeah, so I think I definitely get a lot of value from the Satan narrative. You should clip that and put it in as a clip to the intro. But yeah, no, I think.
So which part of the Satan narrative? Because I feel like there's a few different parts. There's the part where he says, "I am beautiful," and why is God above me? There's that part, and then there's the part where he gets overthrown, and then there's the part where he goes and tries to trick humanity, and then there's the part where he's going to come back and try and take as many people with him to the abyss. To paraphrase the whole Bible, which of those parts reaches out to you about Satan the most?
I think I do, and it's a very interesting place to deep dive, just because you start to really think what is the nature of evil? Is it something that's it's pretty obvious to see some of the ills in the world around us and be yeah, that's evil or whatever, you can point that out. But when you're trying to figure out what the root of it is in a more clinical way, it's really hard without that emotional reaction or a conscience to something to be well, what is evil about that, or why is that in opposition to whatever your creating force is or something. But I do think it has a lot to do with just kind of substituting your own. At the core, it's substituting your this other identity in place of the creator's identity, I guess. And so I think that's what creates most of the conflict, is trying to keep things on this path of creation and goodness and how things are supposed to work, versus trying to subvert that into a different path. And so it's kind of a war of paths, essentially, for how things will turn out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Going back to your world building a little bit, say that 15 times fast. World building.
Oh shoot.
I get sucked into world building too. I love it. I have these whole stories of history in my head, and I'm this is where we are today because of these 10 past events. How do you balance in your stories the world building versus the characterization, and showing the conflicts that each of these characters are enduring in this particular moment while still managing to build up the world? And I feel like you're cheating a little bit because you're writing short stories. You're running a different path than I am with my novels and stuff. And that reminds me, I forget who said this quote, and to paraphrase, as I do all of my quotes, writing a short story is running through a field with flowers and the sun is out and it's bright and it's beautiful, and then as soon as you start to write a novel, you enter a deep dark forest and there's no light of day around you. Again, to paraphrase it, I don't remember who said it, but again, I feel like you're cheating with your short stories, and I used to do that too. So I'm going to encourage you to maybe write a novel someday.
It's way more fun, dude. I mean, if I got so much world to tell in so little time, so you know, now that I'm 30 or whatever, 32 or something.
I don't even know how old you are, man. I forget too sometimes.
Yeah. You know,
so going back to my question, then, how do you balance that within your short stories?
Basically, I make the story the shortest I can to get that point across from that event that I'm wanting to talk about. So for like my first book, I just wrote a short story about a guy who travels across the land. That was it. Like, so I tried to make that as interesting as possible, but I'm like, I had, you know, some ideas of some cities that I wanted to show off. I had some ideas of like some creatures I wanted to show off, and maybe like a few cultural things from like that the people did, or, you know, a little bit of history. So I'm like, okay, like I got all these things I like that I want to share. Okay, my character, and then I just like put my character into, you know, kind of knit together a narrative where he goes and does all those things and moves through that area. And some of it is actually like partially even exploratory by me, you know. So like I already have my map down. I already have, you know, my loose history of the world. I already have, you know, some of the names for places. So like as the character goes through there, like I can even add stuff because I already have this like depth of information to work off of. So like I look at where he is on a map and I'm like, oh, he's actually close to this area. So like I, you know, put in a diversion there or something, you know, and then it's like I get to tell about this now and then like really flesh it out. Whereas before maybe I just had a name for this place that sounded interesting. And so like, you know, as I'm writing this character I'm exploring a little bit, and then I get to just be like, oh yeah, that is that place. And then I have, you know, an entire note-taking program that I instantly go, you know, update that. It's kind of like a little wiki that I instantly go update that with and link it to everything, and then it's like now part of my canon, as it were. So for me, yeah, starting with the big events.
I think we lost you.
Telling the minimum amount I can get to get that idea across, and then so my second story is kind of about the cataclysm portion. And so it's, you know, this girl astronomer that in this like kind of Egyptian Babylonian town that basically kind of gets a vision like through the skies of this comet like hitting the Earth, and and then she's also like kind of an astronomer, so she's like kind of understanding, you know, the physical aspects as well as like kind of the spiritual aspects of it, and like figuring it out over the course of the story. And
so what makes your characters special then? Why do you want to follow these characters? Is it because it's just something interesting happening to them, or are they powerful beings, or why do you write about these particular individuals?
I feel like it's kind of like filming a movie or something. It's like, and you have to pick your shots. And so I'm almost like trying to look through the eyes and the thoughts of the characters for a shot. Like it's not about them in most cases. I'm not really a character-driven writer. I just don't find much interest in it, to be honest. So I like the big epic stuff. I like the big events, world-changing events and stuff. And I might get to the point where I have all those fleshed out, and then I can get into like a more personal, you know, character piece or something, and I might find some more depth in that. But for now, I find most of the depth in the world. So I'm like trying to frame this large event, and then from that finding like which character would have like the most access to that event, or the most you know, insight into that event, or it would impact their life the most or something. So yeah.
So I like how you just fully admitted that you don't really care about your characters and you're there for the world building. That's awesome. Some people would argue, however, that all writing should be character driven. Now, whether or not that's true, I'll leave that up to you and the audience. But nonetheless, do you think that you're writing for yourself or for other people? Because I think if you're writing for yourself, it's completely okay to explore these fantasy worlds and write the way that you want. But if you're writing for other people, you might have to, you know, acquiesce to their needs a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I don't set out to write boring characters. Like, that's not, like, I think any good story has to have all the parts work. But I do think there is, like, a focus. You don't watch, like, The Matrix for, like, the dialogue necessarily, you know? Or, like, It's like, it's a cool science fiction idea. It's got some like gun fu in it, and like, honestly, I'm one of the weirdos that does watch Matrix for the dialogue. But,
I was going to argue with you for a second there, but yeah.
Like, but from the amount of like complaints I see from the second and third one about like the dialogue dragging on and being like boring, and like people just wanting more, train fights or something. I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like that's the common sentiment. But so I think, and it's not like it's atrocious writing or anything, but it's not like, when you think of like a movie with just amazing dialogue, that's Matrix doesn't come to mind, So I think you do have to cover all your bases and not like drop the ball and just have like a paper cardboard, cutout character for sure. So I do try to like, definitely still add emotion and good interactions. It's not my strong point by any means, but I don't think that's an excuse to like just brush off one part of your story completely. It's just that's not my focus. So
yeah,
I mean, you seem like more of a character-driven person, right? Does that come naturally?
I am, but I'm the weak individual who said people probably want to read about characters, so I'll write about characters. When in reality, I just want to write a story about the world. So maybe you're a stronger writer than I am. I don't know.
That's the only way I can keep going with it, is to have the motivation is by doing what I like. Because you asked if it's more for me, and it is.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that kind of ties into my next question then, which is, what is your end game goal for this? Are you truly just like, I want to write stories because there's this world that's in my head, and I want to get it out on the page? Or are you like, I want other people to read it because I think it's cool? Like, what's your goal with that?
I wouldn't lie if there wasn't a part of me that did want some of that, to like nerd out with somebody over like my created world. I think that would be like, it's kind of a little secret fantasy. But ultimately, it is just something that like is in my head that feels like it needs to come out and whatnot. So I think for me, like, I'm still in the kind of exploratory phase as well. Like I've only completed even one short story, and then I'm working on editing the second one right now and publishing it. But like I have notes for many others, but I'm still trying to kind of figure out, and that's part of where the 3D modeling and like the game making comes in, because I think there is more ways to tell a story than just a book, and so I'm trying to learn maybe some of those skills and see if something, because I really like movies and visual aspect of things. I think that really can put you in a place that just writing can't, and so I think trying to figure out how to meld that together, and to like, I just at least want experience with it right now, so I can at some point come back later and know what I'm doing enough to like, if a project comes my way where it's like, oh, we have this opportunity to do a short film for it or something, I'll be like, oh, okay, like I already have some ideas and I already know what I like, and I know what direction I would take it, just as a start, so. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you say it like that, and I really do love your idea of video games as a medium for this. Because as you were talking, I was thinking, I was like, where's there a place for a world but no character in it yet? And I think MMOs or RPGs in some ways, where you can like choose your own character and how they fit into this world, is like a perfect example of that, because there's this whole world that's set up, and there's characters in the world who are maybe like the leaders and stuff, but you don't really care what the leaders are thinking and how they're feeling. They're just the leaders. And then there's a war going on over here, and then there's like I really love the idea of making a video game, and the individual can insert their own character. Hey, I'm a blonde-haired, 120-pound, scantily clad chick running around killing people in this world. Or, I'm a lizard person who grew up in the mines of Geneg, or whatever it is, and they insert themselves into the world.
Yeah, and it's, then the people can also get as engaged with the lore and the story as they want to, you get the people that read the RuneScape books, in-game books or whatever, and it's like, yeah, if you want it, it's there, there's like all this depth and stuff. So yeah, I just, it is like, I think like you pointed out, it's great to have like a blank slate in a world, because you already want to give someone a blank slate when you're giving them a video game character, so it slots in very naturally. Would you turn your like any of your worlds or creations into a game?
I mean, if I had the opportunity, I would love to. I think that they're very character driven, though, so the person would have to play as the character, unless I was to do some sort of offshoot, which I don't think it's impossible to figure out how to do that. But right now, it'd be playing, like, for example, if you're playing like Batman, you're playing as Batman in the video game. You're not playing as like somebody else in the Batman story. So if that makes sense, or like Superman or Spider-Man, like you're playing this character as they experience these things, which is very different than, like I mentioned before, an MMO where you are whoever you want to be in this giant world, and that's how you experience the things.
Do you feel like it's only the MMO genre that like helps you explore a world, or like is there a different form that maybe is even more enriching, or like some sort of like a point and click adventure even, or like, have you ever heard of Detroit Become Human?
No.
Or like one of those like dialogue heavy like cinematic games or something where you're like choices matter type thing. Do you feel like there's a certain genre that would really...
I was kind of thinking about it, and I think even regular MMOs would not work for this, because for the most part you have like a story that you are following. Like take Skyrim, for example. You have to follow the path of the Dovahkiin if you are going to make it to the end of the game. And so there is, like, you can do all these different offshoots and paths and explore the world that way, but there's still a story that you're following. Whereas MMOs, I mean, there may be some story that you're following, but for the most part, like, you can go to whatever city you want and be whoever you want and interact with other players who are also experiencing the world how they want. I think it's a little bit different than any other genre.
Yeah. So do you think there's more value then in that freedom to explore the world, or is it like...
I think it depends on both the artist, the creator of the game, and the player, the person who's experiencing the game, as to what they're looking for. Some people, for example, they just want to play a shooter where they run down a very scripted pathway, like Halo. All the levels are very linear. And there's a great story to Halo, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the story to Halo, but it's not a choose-your-own-adventure kind of thing. It's you run down this hallway and kill these 10 guys, and then turn right and run up that hallway and kill those 3 guys. Like, that's what Halo is. As opposed to open-world MMOs where you can... My character is a rogue or something like that, or my character is a mage, and it's 2 very different people with very different skill sets, with very different experiences, who are going down very different paths even. Yeah,
that is true. Yeah, I have notes for a half-baked MMO sitting in my files, so I've already been down this rabbit hole.
Well, maybe you'll find yourself a job at a video game company as a content designer someday. I know I've looked at those a few times.
Yeah, you just never know where life takes you. So I'd rather have all these ideas now, or like while I have them just in my head, I'm just like, yeah, I'll write them down, and then if something ever comes of it, I'm like, yeah, I got notes for a MMO, sure. Let me pitch it to you. So, yeah.
Nice. So you had mentioned that you have one full short story and you're working on another. I was under the impression there was more. Is it just those 2 and you got more in the works, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, I've just basically got the one and then working on another one, and then I'm working on editing the second one, and then I have a third that I'm writing right now. So
okay,
the first 2 are the fantasy ones, and then the third one is a science fiction one.
But it's all the same universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So, what's your goal for this as far as what you want people to get out of it? Is it purely entertainment for them, or are you trying to speak in themes and be preachy without being preachy?
Well, when you put it like that, I feel like I'm walking into a trap. No, it's definitely more theme based. It's a lot of... I absolutely love symbology, and like I think I've been watching a lot of Orthodox stuff lately, and I just can't get enough. It's like so basically, I think the ultimate literary like book is, and everyone will disagree, but is the Bible, just because like there's a really profound thing where you can encode so much information in such a short, like relatively short amount of text. Like people are still diving into the content of this book, thousands of years later, and it's still like sparking inspiration and ideas and like discussion and all this kind of stuff. And I think there's, you could even just see that with, you could see like an example of that with somebody you talked with, maybe you talk with like Elon Musk, right? And then you go talk with your next door neighbor, and, you can just, that you might have the same length of conversation, but one is going to like leave you walking away with like a million thoughts and a million ideas, and the other one's going to leave you just being like, okay, like on to the next thing, So I think they're just with the power of language and how much can be actually encoded in it, just by the choice of words, the themes brought up, just the amount of complexity that can be baked into simple sentences and structures. I think that is really where like the meat and potatoes of like good writing and good narrative is. And so that's where I want to sit. Hopefully it's entertaining, but for me, like, I'm trying to pack as much philosophy and world ideas into this as I can. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, one of the guys I was talking with, again to paraphrase him, he said like you have to earn the respect of the audience by entertaining them before you can be preachy. You can't say, "Hey, I'm going to tell you a lesson," and then tell them the lesson. You have to like sneak it in there so they almost don't even notice it's happening.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, like. So I do think, like, because you said like preachy and you're using like those kinds of words and lessons, but I think if you can, I don't think you have to teach anybody or like preach anybody. It's just, I think all you have to do is present ideas with value, and from that people will draw their own, like it'll impact their life in their own specific way, like in ways that are unique to them. And so I think that's kind of the beauty of like speaking truth into the world, is that people who are ready to like, who want to hear that, like apply it to their own life. You don't need to like apply it for them. Like they're the people that are like want to grow and want to like seek and expand themselves will like latch on to that in any form, wherever it is, whether they see an inspirational movie, they hear like a speaker that they really like get, motivated by or whatnot. It doesn't matter. Like people will find that value wherever it's located. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that's true. Now, who do you expect to find the value? Is it someone who is like, I know Paul, I'm going to read his works, or is it someone surfing a random forum on the internet someday finds a link to it, or are you going to advertise it? Like, who do you think is going to read this stuff?
My mom for sure.
Yeah.
No. I don't know, actually. Like it's been kind of a leap of faith for me, just because I don't know off the top of my head who would read it. So that's why I have to do it first and foremost for myself, and that takes some of the pressure off, which is nice. So that keeps me going, probably more so than trying to come up with like an imaginary reader. I would hope that just anybody that like, and again, I probably need more feedback and criticism. Well, yeah, I probably would. It would be helpful to like get more feedback and criticism, but it's hard to find people that like are trying to, that understand what you're doing and then can give you like feedback based off of that. I mean, maybe I've given you some feedback and maybe this falls into that category, but sometimes like, you're like, I'm trying to really just write the best like action novel I can. And then, the person giving feedback's like, it really just doesn't have a lot of thoughtful dialogue in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
I know.
That is a good question. Like, for example, if you're trying to focus on world building and you say, there was a very tall tower that was 763 stories tall, and on top of it there was an antenna, and there was windows on all sides. And this is important to the world. That's why you said it. Mm-hmm. But someone says that was not a very well put together sentence. Would you take that as feedback and be like, okay, let me restructure my sentences? Or would you be like, no, it is what it is. I'm just telling a story about the world. How would you as an author take that?
I would take it. I think that would be helpful. I think like if things are phrased in a nice way, like you can get away with critiquing just about anything. I think. I don't know. But Yeah, I think like if you just like have enough gentleness and just could be like, but it's hard to. I mean, I would like that feedback because it is specific to my goals, for sure. Whereas like if someone was like, even if someone like critiqued like the character work and stuff, like I would still listen. It wouldn't be like on the top priority of things for me to like fix or like try to, like I would keep it in mind going forward, but it wouldn't be like something that was just like, okay, I gotta like change how I do everything now. But yeah. What about you? How do you like feedback and critiques?
I like to be told that I wrote the most beautiful thing ever and that I don't have to change anything. Unfortunately, that has never happened. Apparently, I'm very
paid Amazon reviews.
Yeah, exactly. I have bots do it for me. I don't know where I was going to go with that sentence. I have been told before that I am very long-winded and I use too many commas and my sentences are too long. And
I do that too.
Yeah. So I have definitely been given lots of feedback, but every person that has ever read any of my stuff has given me wildly different feedback. And I definitely think that there's good things in the feedback from people. I'm not discounting any of their feedback. But you have to understand that you're getting feedback from someone who doesn't know you and the story that you're trying to write necessarily. They have their own tastes. Like if I were to ask somebody to, critique my fantasy sci-fi and they like mysteries, they're going to think it sucks.
Yeah.
So you have to understand. I'm sorry, what was that?
Not enough mystery in it, duh.
Yeah, exactly. He just told me everything about who killed the person. That's dumb. I want to be curious about who killed the person.
Yeah.
So you just have to take feedback with, a pound of salt all the time. And again, it doesn't mean that there's not good feedback. And there are people who are much better writers than I am that have given me feedback, and I've been like, oh, I don't want to hear it. And then I like come back 3 months later, I'm like, damn, they were right. Okay, fine, I'll change this or something. But it takes a lot of courage as an author to accept feedback from people. And I mean, not even necessarily just feedback, like just writing in general. Putting your works out there, you're like, this is stuff that was in my head, and now it's out there for everybody to see and to judge, and to write little mean, nasty comments in the Amazon reviews, and to send me letters about how I got a certain fact wrong. So it is a very vulnerable experience, especially when you're writing characters, which I know you don't do, because every character is a little part of yourself. Yeah, you write them, but are they actually little parts of yourself, or are they just inhabitants of the world that you invented?
I think they have to be a part of yourself, right? You can't write what you don't know, so like it's always going to be colored by how you see the world. So
that's true.
It's not a coincidence that all my characters are depressed. I'm just kidding. No,
I'll give you a call after this. We can talk about
it. They're actually all pretty happy-go-lucky. Well, yeah, for the most part. I like writing like dumb, fun characters. That's my go-to.
I should try that sometime.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like great because they don't know anything about the world, so they have to be told everything. But no, actually, one of my favorite characters of all time in any show. Have you ever seen The Expanse?
I never have, and I know I should.
Okay, it was okay. People like it, but there's this character that's like, he's just like the meathead muscle of the crew on the ship, and basically there's a great scene where he. They basically like someone asks him like what his morality is, or like how he comes up with his like ethics basically. And he's like, well, I'm just like too dumb to figure that kind of stuff out. So that's why I have this other person on this ship who I respect so much. And so whatever she does, I just assume that's probably the right thing to do. And I just do whatever she tells me. And so he's like,
so that's your role model for life is this guy here?
No, not at all. But he literally just like outsources his like, he's like, this is beyond me to figure out. So I just, I just use this person, like, kind of outsource my morality or my whatever, And it's like, I just love that character because it's like, it's a level of self-awareness that you don't often see, like, in a character, but it's just, like, good writing in my opinion. So.
Nice. Yeah, we'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, any final comments and or would you like to read an excerpt of anything?
No, I'm not going to read anything, but, yeah, I think the comments are... first and foremost, thanks for having me on.
And Merry Christmas.
Thanks. Yeah, I wore red. Yeah, I think it's very cool to just have like kind of a space to talk about some of the stuff I'm doing, because it's like you don't often get a bunch of uninterrupted time to like blabber on about your work. So it's nice
You're
having
welcome.
a space, yeah, to be able to kind of bring some of that forward and talk about some of the deeper things that might be involved with that. So yeah, I wish you best of luck in your writing endeavors too. Are you working on anything currently?
Yes, I am. I recently started a strictly fantasy novel. We'll see. I'm only like 20 pages into it, so I don't know how it's
What
going
does
to turn out. Maybe I'll
strictly
give
mean?
up on it like 80% of my other projects. But I'm kind of excited to see where it goes.
What does strictly mean?
Well, because my other one is like sci-fi fantasy,
Oh, okay.
so it's a different universe.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Maybe
Nice,
I'll contract you to come and help me build it.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'm always down to work. I think that's actually a good takeaway for other creative people out there is definitely try to collaborate with people. I think that alone can give you a lot of motivation and like fresh inspiration that you might not have had otherwise. I think that's something that's helped me out a ton. But yeah,
Right.
if you
Well,
want to
that was a
collaborate-
really good final comment. So you did have some good stuff to say.
Thanks. Appreciate
All right.
that.
Well, everybody, thank you and have a good evening.
Merry Christmas.